man.
Well, God, that's about as good of intro as we're gonna get.
Honestly.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess welcome back. This is going to be episode 2 of Damn Fine Coffee, right?
I think so.
That's right.
And this is sort of Damn Fine Coffee is sort of our monthly when there's a fifth Thursday in the month. It's sort of a monthly wrap up. It's where we get into sort of bigger topics. It's a little bit more of a discussion instead of playing. It's still RPG and Twin Peaks focused, but it's not so much a actual play and more of just more like a regular podcast. And so, yeah, Matt and Patrick, it's good to see you guys. It's been a couple weeks since our last one of these.
Yeah. Been entirely too long, fellas.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is the only spot you can get Patrick and I in the same room. So.
It's.
I'm not blaming you. I mean,
Right.
this is my first time back in the saddle in a few weeks, so it's all me.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, and it's going to be good because I think I think I don't know how summer plans is going to go for everybody, but I feel like we're about to. The soft launch of the restaurant is over, and the hard launch where we start doing delivery is about to kick in. I feel like with some of the things that we might be up to soon. So
that's a perfect coincidence there with the start of Bear season 2. So good stuff.
Oh, I haven't seen that show.
Oh, it's so good. It gives me, I want to have a heart attack every time we watch it. But so if you have anxiety, don't watch it. Great show though.
I don't really, to be honest with you. So I'm good.
Okay. Yeah. You wouldn't have a heart attack. Maybe.
I've cleared that bar, but I am getting older. So who knows what,
talk to your doctor first.
Yeah. All right. So how have you guys been recently? Doing all right?
Pretty good. I mean, I guess Patrick, you guys, checked in with your conspiracy plays, which I'm looking forward to episode 2, which I will probably drop sometime around the same time as this, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Really enjoyed your guys' first playthrough. That looks like a fun game. I've been bedridden, and so no RPGing so much as I did bring an RPG book with me to the hospital, but I never got to it. I don't know what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this will be great for and then I just watched Chopped and shit around the clock. Other than that,
ask what
great.
Book? What was the one that made the cut?
It's not Monster Hearts. It's it's the new PBTA. No, not PBTA. The name is escaping me because obviously I didn't read in the hospital.
Beast Hunter?
No. It's Art. What system did we just play? What was
Blades in the Dark?
Long Dark Space.
Oh,
Between the Stars.
yeah.
What's that based off of? That name is
Isn't it Blades in the Dark?
Blades in the Dark. Okay,
nice.
So there's a Blades in the Dark RPG. Here, I'll just Apocalypse Keys. Whew, man.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What's that one about?
So that is basically Blades in the Dark Hellboy.
Oh, yes.
Just had a Kickstarter this year, or the Kickstarter delivered this year, or something like that. And I didn't back the Kickstarter because I didn't hear about it. But our mutual friend Matt Allen had reached out and said, "Hey, had you heard about this thing called Apocalypse Keys?" And I was like, "This looks outstanding." So it made the cut, but other than look at the pretty cover, I didn't do anything with it. So enough about me not doing anything. What about you guys? You guys have been RPGing anything new?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, doesn't matter to the people watching and listening, but last night Patrick and I finished up Conspiracist. So like you were saying, Matt, that should go out hopefully in the near future. Matt, before you and I got in a little Cyberpunk, and we're going to finish that up at some point.
Yep.
And these are all things we're going to get into, I think, a little bit tonight. But RPGing stuff, there's a little bit of outside the marriage RPGing that I do. But I think, Matt, you one of those outside the marriage things that I do is with the AAC is Forbidden Lands. And is that Patrick, do you know much about Forbidden Lands? One that's ever...
I have a couple of the books and the box set, but I haven't played it. But it's always been interesting to me.
I find it really interesting, and it's being run very well by Duck over in the AAC Cabal. Well, I guess the C is Cabal. but yeah, otherwise, I felt bad. I had to cancel the last one that I was supposed to run outside. So, yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
but Patrick, I know you tried RuneQuest, right?
Yeah, I played. So this is my second go round again with some
Okay.
some AAC guys, and so I played in a kind of similar setup as to what we've got: two guys and a DM. Don't Google
Mhm.
that on safe search off. And and yeah, it's been fun. It's an interesting system. It's a little
Nice.
it's pretty beefy, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been good. So
Very nice. Very nice. So I guess, and Matt, you were saying you've been taking it a little easy recently.
Yeah.
So before we get into stuff, should we do a little bit of our namesake, a little Twin Peaks? I wrote it down. So Twin Peaks trivia.
Yeah. I mean,
All right.
it's our name after all.
Yeah. So
Certainly not any bear trivia. I don't know, like why we're starting off a podcast with some show that. Anyways, proceed.
wow.
I came on theme tonight. I thought it would show up better, but my old Twin Peaks mug broke, and so my wife got me a new Twin Peaks mug. I actually like the old one quite a bit, and this one's pretty sweet too. But anyways,
where do you get that kind of stuff? I might need to.
I don't know. My wife got it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Probably like Etsy or something.
All right. So so then let's jump in. So
Sure.
I don't know if this is an easy or hard question, but I think at some point, I don't know which season it is. It might be season 1. There is a talking bird that might be a witness to the Laura Palmer killing.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, who owned that talking bird? And I have some follow-ups if that one's too easy.
Isn't it? It's not Bob's parrot.
Was it Leo's? That seems too nice for Leo.
It was Leo's buddy's parrot though.
Jacques?
Wasn't it? I think it's Jacques' parrot.
I'm just gonna stand by until you say like final answer or something. I don't want to like.
I think it's too fancy to be. Let's go Jacques. Jacques is as good a guess as we're gonna get. I don't remember. I remember the bird.
Okay, so yeah, the answer is Jacques.
Nice.
So, second question, if you want, who killed the bird?
Andy? Wasn't it like an accident or something like that?
No, somebody shoots the bird.
Was that a cliffhanger?
I think Leo shoots the bird. Like he gets the keys out of the drawer in the fucking yard and shoots the bird. I feel like it's Leo.
I feel like it was something like an accident. Oh, you go Leo, I'll go Andy, and we'll see.
Okay, yeah. Final answer.
Okay. The answer is Leo. He shoots it through a window with a sniper rifle or something.
That's right. I knew it happened in the police station.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so final, as sort of like a bonus, do you know the name of the bird?
Oh, shit.
This one's a little tough, so that's why it's sort of like a...
I have no idea.
Yeah. Nothing.
All right. Bird's name was Waldo.
Oh, yeah. Whatever, we got that.
Yeah, Waldo is a talking mynah bird. And yeah, Leo Johnson killed it to shut it up. I think they had like a voice-activated recorder in the room. And it started saying like, don't hurt me, Jacques. Don't hurt me, Jacques. Like it was sort of repeating Laura's last words. Yeah, so Leo had to silence that thing.
Nice.
Permanently.
Leo.
Soprano style.
Bless him.
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. Yeah, that's what I got for trivia tonight.
Who knew that Leo would be such a prominent figure in our trivia questions? We had Leo's truck. We had this. I don't know
right.
what else we
Yeah.
Well, I feel like he's a good character because he's important, but he's never, he's never like the center of things. So you would remember every detail. Like, you probably remember a lot about Cooper,
Right.
just because everybody loves him so much, and nobody loves Leo. So, yeah.
Leo's best moment is when he falls in the cake. I stand by that. I mean, it's just bone split, like gut busting laughter the first time it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so there we go. So, yeah, I guess for tonight, what we were going to sort of do on this sort of Fifth Thursday Damn Fine Coffees, we're going to sort of, the past month was sort of a month as we sort of get this up and running of light, low prep RPGs. And so we thought we would maybe recap sort of our experiences. You know, again, we've done Cyberpunk. We still have to finish that one. We've done The Long Dark Space Between the Stars, and we've done The Conspiracist. And so I figure we can sort of recap some of our thoughts and experiences about those sessions. You know, it doesn't have to be too detailed. And then I thought maybe there's some things we could talk about with rules light, maybe low prep games as a whole, and just see where it goes. So everything kicked off, Matt, by you choosing The Long Dark Space Between the Stars. And is it worth sort of just giving a quick encapsulation of what that game is in case people didn't listen to the sessions, or just say, you know, if you want to check it out, go listen to the sessions?
No, I think it's totally worth it. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
go check it out if you're interested. But Long Dark Space Between the Stars is a space horror game. It's all of these are rules light, low prep. I guess I haven't read the Conspiracist rules, but that's certainly the vibe I got from it in the video. And so this is one player and one GM, and it's loosely based on Forged in the Dark, which isn't a system that Art or I had much experience with at all. It was kind of our first dipping our toes in. And the interesting thing about this game in particular, in addition to all the stuff we're going to talk about, the flexing the different creative muscles by using low prep, is the player sacrifices parts of himself or herself to make rolls. And so you can't ever just go in and roll a statistic. You're making a roll, but at the same time, maybe you're giving up some of the ship or your body or your memory. And so it's kind of like a resource management while you try to make enough advances against it's like a clock, but it's not an actual clock represented in the game. But in our session, I used a mad computer and then like failing, not life support, but maybe just failing ship systems generically. And we had like a mad AI that, spoiler alert, tries to hold Art's, I don't know, he just kind of loses it and just wants to like drift forever. It was a lot of fun. It was it's good.
All right. And then we followed that up with Cyberpunk, which is also a Forged in the Dark inspired game. Cyberpunk's CBR plus symbol PNK. Again, rules light, Forged in the Dark sort of derivative. I guess that's sort of like an engine or a system. And yeah, we were sort of doing a heist. The concept of the game is, I think, that you're sort of doing that one last heist. That's sort of the construct that they recommend, but they say like you can use it for campaigns or whatever. And it's just I cheated. I went it wasn't I didn't have to engage in Cyberpunk's like low prep because they provided an adventure. And so I didn't have to rely on the tools, because I don't know if there's actually any like low prep prompts or tools in the rulebook proper, because it's trying to stay rules light and as lean as possible. But there definitely is a sort of a second book that gives you prompts and questions that you could use to sort of spin basic scenarios to provide like some substance to build on. And I gotta say, like, for me, it was the first time I've ever run a Forged in the Dark kind of game. First time I've ever run something so narrative. And I definitely stumbled out of the gate. But I feel like by the end of the session, I was like, oh, I kind of get it. It's clicking, and I could see how this could just be a thing you do and just throw it out there when you're looking for something to do. And then I think after that, then the next one was Conspiracist. Patrick, which you ran.
Yeah, after that, we kind of rolled into me running Conspiracist, which is, it's kind of its own thing. I don't think it's a derivative of any other game systems out there. To even really call it a system is being very generous, I think. Because it really is. They tell you, do not prep anything. Don't run this as a campaign game. This is going to be just a filler game, basically. And it was. We had a good time with it. We managed to stretch it out over the 2 sessions.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's the general shtick of the game, I guess, is your player characters play as low-level Illuminati, and they're given basically some random object. In the book's example, your players are handed a clear plastic bag of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they have to determine what their mission is from the Illuminati based on that object. So Art, I believe you received a fortune cookie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it's up to the players, not the GM or the controller to decide what it is they're actually doing. And it's cool because it goes through. There's no failing in the game. There's just complications, which is a cool concept. I know a bunch of other games that kind of pick up on that. So
Right.
if something fails, or if you fail a roll in the game, you add another layer of weirdness to what's happening, basically.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how our game got just completely bonkers off the rails so quickly. But it was a good time. We'll get into, I think, what we did and didn't like about it, but
Yeah.
it was good.
So if you don't mind me sort of getting things right off the bat, how did you guys feel about your separate systems? They both come in and say like they're low prep.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the game sort of supported that, or do you feel like it could have used a little more something to sort of feed the fire?
So for Conspiracist, like a game that I would compare, a game that I enjoy that's very low prep feeling to me is Morkborg. And I would compare,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like what I compare everything to when it's low, because I haven't done a bunch of PBTA stuff. So I look at something like a Morkborg and I look at something like Conspiracists, and there's a bunch of tables and things to give you cues. You know, if I was having a bad day or whatever in Conspiracist, that would throw the whole thing off, right? Because it's pretty much on just you and me, or you, me, and Matt figuring out what we're going to do for the night.
Okay.
I mean, it was a pamphlet more than anything, which had, it was great for a one session thing, or one split over two. But I personally, I like a little bit more meat on even in my low prep games. I think that I need something that's more than just guidelines, right? So that's
Okay.
just me.
And
Yeah, I
does
mean,
more? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
there's a significant difference between rules light low prep and just low prep, right? I mean, if
Mhm.
Morkborg is low prep, Morkborg is far from rules light, I would say, just
Sure.
from my limited exposure, but like the core rulebook. There's a million different Morkborg things now. And that's like Blades in the Dark, right? I mean, that's anything forged in the dark. If it's rooted in Blades in the Dark, Blades in the Dark is a really thick, rule book.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
but you were going to ask about Morkborg before I go into.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and and I assume by that measure, I mean, I own Morkborg, so I
Sure.
sort of know what's in there. But would you say that gives you more meat to chew on in terms of the low prep?
I think so. I mean, I think, again, to Matt's point, it depends on what books you're pulling from.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the basic. If you were to sit down with a bunch of new people to play a game, the low barrier of prep is there's an adventure at the back of it that's pretty good, and you can just go to Scumburther and pop out a couple of characters like that, and
Right.
you're ready to roll. And it's rules light enough where you could pick it up and have something going. You could pull it off the shelf at a game store and say, we're going to play this, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like that sort of low prep. It's in from my exposure. It feels like something that's becoming a thing because, like, I know there's a massive Kickstarter. I don't know if it was called Shadow Dark. These are all sort of OSR kind of games. I think it was called Shadow Dark or something like that. There's like Knave Second Edition, and the thing that aside from being like OSR kind of games, the other thing I sort of gathered that they had in common was they put a large emphasis, at least in my impressions, on this sort of like, we're going to give you a million tables,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the low prep approach. Like, you don't need to put much thought into something. You want a dungeon, boom, 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 you got a dungeon. And so it seems like low prep, again, from my impression, is sort of having this time, it's day in the sun, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was kind of curious about. And so, Matt, with the long dark space between the stars, did you feel like the low prep part came through, being a forged in the dark?
Yeah, I'll answer that first. I don't want to lose your thought about low prep having its time in the sun. I think we should dive into that because I think a lot of factors contribute to that. But I'll say it did a good job. I wouldn't say it did a great job. I think there's other low prep rules light things that I've done that have provided you in my experience, you're going to get in like a couple different ways. You're going to get tables to consult, like, all right, what are you trying to rob right now? And then you're going to roll on a D6 table. You're robbing a bank. You're robbing a museum. You're robbing a mansion, whatever, or come up with whatever you want on your own. The other option is like open-ended questions. And Long Dark Space Between the Stars had kind of both of that. At least when we started, there were 7 questions to answer that Art and I answered. And then as far as like the actual scenarios, it was really just like, you have 2 problems. Here's some kind of recommendations for your minor problem, major problem. At any point, anytime someone like flushes those out, which, that's like common on a Kickstarter, like, oh, if we, reach our funding goal, we'll add in 3 more tables or whatever.
Right.
I mean, tables are great. And tables are great if you're... I'm a really big fan of this game called Heist.
Yes.
No, that's not what it's called, right?
It is Heist.
Okay. Anyways, big fan of that. That's how it works. I guess where I'm going with this is like, I want a blend of the initial questions to like build the world, and like as part of your low prep, like you don't have to answer those questions beforehand, you just show up and answer those as a table. I really like that. And as a matter of fact, I've like pulled stuff from low prep games that have these open-ended questions. Kids on the Bike is the best example. I love the character creations in Kids on the Bike. It's rules light, it's relatively low prep, but it has these wonderful character creation questions that are, you ask the table and you ask each other as you're kind of building your session. I love that. And then at the same time, like with something like Heist, you roll on the table and you're like, all right, we're going to go rob a bank. And that's your seed. And you just kind of build up from there. So there's all kinds of different levels you're going to get here. I think Long Dark Space Between the Stars did a good job with it. Its recommendations were kind of run of the mill, right? But that's just someone more creative than me would be fine with that. So.
Yeah, so with my thing, like I said, with Cyberpunk, I chose, they give you a starting adventure called Mind the Gap, which I thought was solid with the part we've gotten through so far. But there's a separate, it's sort of designed as a pamphlet. The rules are a pamphlet. The GM guide is a pamphlet. There's a pamphlet called Framework, and that sort of explains to you how to do longer campaign kind of things, how there's like downtime sessions. But there is basically like your typical build a run kind of like roll d6s, and you get, just looking at it here, you get like, assassinate tag. It's a political leader, or is it a celebrity, or is it a white hat hacker? Is it so they have your classic tables that, what I feel like for me personally is it's low prep, but not when I'm about to sit down at the table. And so like if I had like the day before, I'm like, oh, I think I need to come up with a run for Cyberpunk. So I'd be like, okay, what did I get? Smuggle courier, energy source, off-world. I'm like, okay, so let me think. And if I have a little time to think, like I appreciate those prompts.
Sure.
But I know for me personally, it might be my inexperience with these kinds of systems. I don't know if I could, to what you did, Patrick, you were basically making the whole thing up on the fly. And I don't know if I personally could use the prompts that spontaneously.
Sure. I don't know if that was the most, just being point blank with it, I don't know if it was the most enjoyable thing that I've ever run. Like we had a good time with it. We had a great time. It was awesome, but I would rather have those tables to fall back on even just as a resource to, even if I never touch them, right? Just to have them as a safety net of, oh God, there's an awkward pause here for 5 minutes while, Art's looking between 2 hallways and like, oh, what's down that hallway? I'm like, I don't know. It's nice to just flip the book and be like, oh, there's, a spider monkey down that hallway or whatever. So,
I mean, I think it's interesting that what these rules like games, what they present to the players and what they present to the GMs, like when we say low prep, everyone's going to tackle that low prep different, right? The first time, and just a slight correction, the Heist game, I call it Heist for where we've run in the past. The game itself is called Score. The first time I ran Score, I had I knew my signposts. Like I knew what scenes I wanted to have happen because I picked up the game, got it from Kickstarter. I was like, this thing rocks. Oh, I want a scene with this in the bank. I want a scene with this in the bank. And that was like, I spent more time with that. But then we had, a session cancel. It's like, let's do Score.
Right.
And in that one, it was much more on the fly, and you kind of take the training wheels off. And so low prep's going to mean 10 different things,
Sure.
right? I mean, it's going to be you're completely improvising, you're completely relying on flying by the seat of your pants, or it's, hey, here's your prep, and here's these seeds we're going to plant, and then like go and do that. Because I mean, people prep different, and some
Sure.
GMs, even with a rules complex thing, they're gonna fly by the seat of their pants. They're not gonna have a fully fledged out adventure in front of them. But I think it is an interesting like exercise for GMs. And like my biggest takeaway with low prep rules light things are like, what can I use to enhance the big boys?
Yeah.
Right.
Like Pathfinder and D&D. I mean, there's things that either just from running a rules light thing or just the questions that they present that I think are worth having. And then that also leads to then like, ooh, I want a bunch of tables to consult for Pathfinders, and then like I'm buying these extra just tables books for
Right.
when you want to do these things at the anyways.
Right. So I guess, we sort of, if I could just ask like a completely pointless question, do you like this low prep? Do you like this style of approach to generating the story that, keeping the rules aside? We'll get to that in a little bit.
I mean, I think so. I've had an awesome time listening to the two things you guys did. I had an awesome time playing, Conspiracist. I want to, after playing all that, I want to go pull down Into the Odd and Morkborg and just be like, okay, let's just, let's do something a little bit. I've had my appetizer. I want a salad now. Like, give me some salad, and then we'll get to the steak and potatoes with Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu and everything.
Right.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you nailed it on the head. I think it's just what am I in the mood for, and it's what exercise what muscles do I want to flex? What thought process do I want to go through? What do I have time for? I would not, if I was going to sit down and play a cyberpunk game, not cyber plus punk, I wanted a campaign. I wouldn't use cyberpunk.
Sure.
And that's more of just like the mechanics of Forged in the Dark with like having, you have these objectives and you have to clear it 4 times or whatever to clear it.
Right.
I don't know if that's strictly how cyber plus punk always works, but that's how Long Dark Stays Between the Stars was. Like, okay, it's cool to sit at thing. I don't want to play that week in and week out.
Sure.
I mean, it's nice that's why Score's so great. Hey, we need to do something. Let's go rob a bank. And so, yeah, I do like them, but I don't like them day in and day out. What about you, Art?
So it's kind of an interesting question. I did enjoy Cyberpunk, and I sort of was approaching it like, would I use this if I were going to run a Cyberpunk campaign? And I think the answer I came up with was not from my first impressions, but maybe if I looked at that framework pamphlet and saw what they did, maybe it gets a little bit more involved. But it was definitely a really, this is going to sound very clinical, and I don't mean it to sound very clinical. It was a very fun exercise for me because it's something I'd never really done before. But I will also say that I'm notoriously an over prepper. And I rely on over prepping for a couple of different things. It helps me, this is going to sound probably counterintuitive, over prepping helps me improvise because I feel like I've thought about, the color of milk in my sci-fi setting so that when somebody throws something in somebody's face, I've had tangential thoughts to the thing I'm being asked to improvise about if I've tried to over prep and think about everything, which is a stupid approach. But I also find coming up with the story, my stories are crap, but coming up with the crap is what I enjoy significantly. So for me, the idea of turning it into, I don't care and just give me tables, like, I don't know if I would always want it to be that, because what I tend to run, and it might start to come out as we get into more things here, but if you've listened to stuff on like the Cabal, they tend to be a little more clockwork. It's not just like go to X and clear X, you guys are both in a game I'm running using Savage Worlds, where you play sort of, James Bond monks. And I don't know if I would. You guys might have a different categorization of it, but I wouldn't categorize that as just a. You could have gotten that story from a series of tables. There's like things going on.
No.
There's a lot of things you haven't encountered yet that you may never encounter, and that's part of the over prep. So it's sort of like, I know, like, if you go there, something might happen, and if you never go there, it doesn't matter. But I don't have to go like, okay, all right, yes, and then hope for the best. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, I think it does. I think when I'm running something, I don't know. I haven't been doing this near as long as most other people, but with Alien, I prepped a ton. And that was my longest. I did Lost Mines of Phandelver, and that took a good amount of chunk, but that was just running the whole thing. We didn't improvise much from it or deviate at all. But with Alien, I had flowcharts, and if I knew I wanted this scene to happen, and the players didn't work with me to get there, then I just moved that scene from, if these are your branches, right? And maybe like, I want you to go down this branch, but you end up going down this branch and you end up in like a Space Chili's, right?
Yeah.
Then I moved the scene that was supposed to happen in like the corporate offices to the executive like dining room and Space Chili's, And so like, I think this all goes to like Art's comment on prepping and stuff. I think even if you're an over prepper and if you're prepping something big and massive like Pathfinder, Alien, whatever, you can still use these same like improvising techniques. I will say that if we're talking about tables and like other ways to come up with these low prep things, and I think I alluded to this, but like the things that get player input are really my jam with these low prep things.
Yeah.
Not all the time. I don't want the players driving the story completely, but those are the best moments in role playing anyways, is when the characters get invested and they start pushing and so when you get like player involvement to help craft this low prep thing, I think that's also pretty sweet too.
Right. And I guess let me just clarify really quickly. Like, I don't want to create like a story on rails. What I try and come up with is an interesting scenario, and I try and understand what the world is going to do without you, right? Like, so if you never show up, I want to know that person is going to do this and that person's doing that. And then the fun for me is sort of what Matt was just saying. Like, it's then dropping you guys into that sandbox of whatever size and seeing how it starts to spin out of control, or butterfly affects this, or, how this thing marches on because you never looked over there, that kind of stuff.
Yep. We could have a whole podcast about this, and Patrick,
Maybe
I
we
need to
should.
get your thoughts in here. But what I was going to say is this whole concept of railroads and not, and like at some point I want a railroad. I want a railroad as a player and as a GM, because, and that doesn't mean like I'm not going to give the players agency or anything like that. But if a GM has a story they want to tell, I want to hear it. And if I have a story I want to tell, I want to like tell it. And so I think like railroading has this negative connotation. But like the very first thing I GM'd was a haunted house, and I had these very definite scenes that I wanted to play out. And the first thing the players tried to do was get their friend out of the house. And so I had the spirits grab the friend and like fling her across the yard and bring her back into the house. Like, obviously the spirits are not letting you take her out of here. So choo choo, enjoy this. And, but like, so, but that gets a negative connotation, but I'm all for it. And so anyways,
well, I think
whether you're doing that in a low prep or like on a massive thing, like if you have a story to tell your story.
I think the railroading, it gets a bad connotation, but I would argue against. I mean, if somebody said, "Oh, well, that's railroading," I'd be like, "But the GM is trying to play a game too. Like, it's not. I'm not here to just be a dancing monkey. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to play a game with you guys. Like, I think that's at the end of the day." That's what if I'm GMing something, I want to have a good time too. And if like you said, if I've got scenes that I've set up, I'll fit them in somewhere. I'll pull them from the corporate office to the Space Chili's. I'll pull them from, the Hoover Dam to the to the Department of Agriculture. Like, we'll make things happen. But if anybody says, well, you just wanted to make that scene happen and you're not letting me have like, yeah, I mean, I put a bunch of time and effort into this and I want to play the game too. Like we're all playing together. This is a together time, everybody, not you're the murder hobo spotlight. So
yeah, there's ways to go about it for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, and the GM playing is sort of the way I've always approached the idea, like of like when you pick a system, that's sort of the GM getting the most say of how the GM gets to play.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
So yeah, but so if I didn't know if anybody wanted to add anything, I was going to sort of duck back for a second, unless somebody
to put us back on track.
No. Okay, so in season 2 of Twin Peaks, what's the padlock combination to Laura's bicycle? No. We were talking about like the idea of like low prep having its moment in the sun, and Matt, you said you didn't want to just wander completely away from that idea.
Yeah, that's like the buzzword, right? I mean, we've had these series of zine quests. Like hell, I'm even like in some form of state with Scar and Scarf, which is my own low prep, low rules game that maybe you'll see the light of day someday. Maybe it won't. Doesn't really matter. But there's so many of them out there, and some are far more successful than others, and some borrow great ideas and implement them well. But I think this is like, I don't know why we're necessarily in it. Like, is it just because of our attention spans and we want something we can pick up and just be like, oh, let's go, let's do this. We don't have to really do anything tonight. I don't know. But I do think there is a lot of just great product. I just held up Wandering Stars from our buddy Jason. Like, that's a great little pamphlet. Highly recommend it. And Score is one of my favorite low prep games. Kids on Bikes, a little bit meatier, but man, you want to talk about like just how much that's improved, I think, character creation and stuff like that. Like it is a really cool time. And I don't know, like maybe this existed in the 90s on like forums and stuff that I predate my interest in RPGs. I don't know, but for me it's still new and exciting, and it's a lot of creative people are doing cool things with not a lot.
Yeah, so if you were to Matt, you're sort of grabbing a couple of books there, like, do you use low prep in its most traditional form, or do you use it integrating it into another part of a process? And Patrick, same with you. Do you you have, like, you mentioned Mork Borg, you said you had Into the Eye, but I don't know how much time you spent with it.
Yeah, I'm a blend, right? Like Score, I did the roadmap thing. I'm a big fan of like the flow chart of this is kind of how, and these are the scenes I want to see and all that stuff. I did that with Score. With the Long Dark Space Between the Stars, I followed the rule book, which are, as the GM, answer these 2 questions, which are what are the threats, right? And then we had the 7 questions to start the game, and that's it. I didn't really think about what's going to go wrong, what you might run into, and I mean, I thought I had a lot of fun with it, and I wouldn't do that every night. So I think I'm a blend. Either it's really low prep in the traditional sense. Okay, let's see what we get. Well, let's consult this table and let's do it.
Yeah, I think I'm probably, if more in the camp of if the mood strikes me, like I want what I'm doing most of the time to be, bigger, heavier games. Like I want to play Savage Worlds. I want to play Deus Vult. I want to play, Dungeons and Dragons. I want to play those things that have more meat to them, even if we're playing a smaller kind of sized, get a smaller campaign or whatever. Oh, this is going to be 6 sessions or whatever, or 2 months. But it's nice to, I think I'd gotten in the rut personally of, hey, I'm in a bunch of really long, kind of winded games. So this month has been really nice, actually, to just be like, hey, let's just fucking goof around with In the Hoover Dam for 2 sessions. And I don't want to have to think. And yeah, that guy's name is, I'm going to name that person. Like this whole scene's people are all going to be named after African countries. And this whole scene's people are all going to be Muppet people. Like, it's just like, and it's just goofy and it's fun. And I mean, this is the shit that we all did in middle school too anyway. I mean, nothing was at least for me, I didn't sit around prepping huge campaigns and things. I was like, yeah, there's 6 goblins in the next room. Like, sure, let's go. So I don't know. It's just, it's a nice palate cleanser between all the big heavy stuff lately.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I will say for me personally, like I don't know how I would. I own Into the Odd Morkborg.
Mm-hmm.
I think I kickstarted Knave Second Edition and the other one Shadow Dark, if I have that name right. And what I could see myself doing, because I like what I also know is that I don't actually care what the initial seed is.
Mm-hmm.
So like in say like the Days of Old thing, like I just needed some reason for something to happen, and then I knew I would flesh it out. And so I often will just sort of pour through old adventures and say like, oh, this is an interesting hook, but I'm going to turn this hook into what I want it to be in this setting that I really love. And so I'm kind of curious if maybe that's the place that, or like, Death in Space, I think has a lot of OSR kind of tables, and I've brought them all into this other sci-fi game I'm running, which is based on Savage Worlds. But I have these tables at the ready in case I ever want to be like, you know what, I don't have any idea to get things started, but I know that once I know they have to go to an asteroid, that's what the roll comes up with. Things will start to pop into my head, and that's the fun part for me, at least. So
beg, borrow, and steal from everything. I mean, that's that's what we do, right? Like,
yeah, and that's half the reason why, like, I've got like shelves and shelves of books. The chances of me running the original Cyberpunk, like 2020, are probably very low.
yeah.
But the chances of me pulling something from there and sticking it in my like 2300 AD like solar system game are probably pretty high, because maybe there's a kernel in there that's something that starts to make me spin out and think of things. So I don't know.
I think I know the answer to the question I'm about to ask. I assume it's going to be the same for all of us, but what happens when you assume. There's podcasts dedicated to, one-on-one RPGs, low prep stuff. I mean, that's all they do. That's the bread and butter. That's what they prefer. But I think what I assume for all of us is we're somewhere in the middle. But I'm also guessing that we probably lean towards the real reason we do this is for the epic Pathfinder campaign, the 10 session, heavy rules. Because most of the time when I'm playing, it's really cool to sit down and like, I'm a bank robber and I have this kind of idea behind me, and that makes me a little bit different. But if I'm going to play in a fantasy world, most of the time, and not all the time, but most of the time, I want to be like, okay, here's the stats on my weapon. Here's 150 spells, and as a counterpoint, with like what I have in mind with my low rules prep, and other people have done this as an original, is like, I'm not going to provide spell rules. Like, that's got to be something that the players and the GM come up with and make their own like magic system almost. But like most of the time, I want a magic system in place. So like, are you the same, or is this like you've had a renaissance and you're burning your Pathfinder books to make room for a bunch of zines?
I think for me, I'm in the same boat as you. I want to be, but for me, it's more the stories. I think that, and I think I'm going to trigger somebody saying this. I think that the bigger, heavier rule book, more prep stuff leads itself to be better at telling more epic stories. Like, there's some funny ha-has that can happen, and there's
son of a bitch.
I know, and you can tell stories. Like, how many times has the heist come up from your score game? Like these are all good stories to tell, but the stories that everybody sits down and talks about years after the fact are, oh, let's talk about the Space Chili's Alien game. Oh, let's talk about Deus Vult. Like, these things that have lasted and we've put a bunch of time into. That's the more time you put into something, the more, I don't know, you get attached to it, and the more that you've got, I don't know, there's just more opportunities for good stories to come out of it. Like I said, that's my 2 cents.
I can maybe see that. I don't know if that's like from the longevity of the system you're in and the type of campaigns you go in. I mean, generally when you're pulling one of these off the shelf, if they're low prep, most of them are going to start off with, here's a low prep game for a 2 to 3 hour session. Like, I mean, that's so right. You're going to have a little snippet when you're talking about like a 3-year, or I don't remember how long Alien was. It wasn't 3 years, but a 1.5 year game of Alien. So yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, but And these aren't I asked what you prefer, obviously, and clearly they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh,
like,
sure.
You're not like tattooing Pathfinder to your forehead, and that's like,
Oh shit!
that's all I'm playing.
We weren't getting tramp stamps.
So cancel that. Is that what I'm hearing, or are we still? Oh, okay. So let me ask you a quick aside. Would you prefer like these low prep tables, or would you prefer a really solid intro adventure in the back of the rule book?
I need clarification, because like it's going to depend. Like, is the premise that I'm sitting down for a low prep game session?
So yeah, let me establish some. Let me paint a picture.
Sure.
All right, Bob Ross.
Yeah, you're trying to get into a system.
Okay.
And so you let's say it's a little bit of a heavier system, and you're trying to get into it, and you don't want the migraine prep side of it to be coming up with a story, because you're trying to get into the rules. And you want it to last a little bit. You're not just, because it's a little bit of a heavier game, you're not just trying to like hit it and quit it. You want to spend a little bit of time with it. But what would be your ideal launching point? Like a low prep series of prompts to get the juices flowing, or a sort of a crafted intro adventure?
If the intro adventure is good, then I want the intro adventure. Like the Pathfinder intro adventure we're going to do is so highly regarded that I can't even imagine trying to tackle Pathfinder with a bunch of random prompts. And obviously people do, but that's not what I want to mess with on my first go through it. And when I did 5e, I did Lost Mines of Phandelver, so
which is supposed to be
which
fantastic.
is also a great. I mean, that's
great,
one of the better
adventure.
intro ones. Some of the other beginner box ones aren't near as good as Lost Mines of Phandelver. So if we're going a meaty something with girth like that, then I want the structure to fall back on. Even though that means more work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really going to run Lost Mines of Phandelver, you at least need to prep like however long you're playing for.
Right.
It's going to take you some time to get through that.
Right.
It's arguably less work to consult some tables and get the rules down and go for it. With an intro like that, you have to do both and really prep it. But I think I want the structure, at least how I feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Patrick?
Same way. Give me a starter box. I mean, I will say starter box. I mean, even if the adventures aren't great, I mean, you still are getting a framework that's put together. If you're trying to learn the rules and start something new and play, like, nobody says that you have to finish it. That's
right. Right.
if you play 2 sessions of it and say, okay, cool, we're going to go off the train tracks now. Let's go.
Yeah.
That could vary. Like, I'm kind of thinking, like, if I was someone who played Pathfinder first edition, Pathfinder second edition comes out, then I might be more inclined, or Shadowrun or something like that. I mean, for me at least, it's important to remember, like, 2019 was my intro into RPGs.
Right.
That's a big difference. If you've been doing this 20 years or something like that, then you're probably a lot more inclined to, we have a new rule system, like, I know what I want to do with this.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it's going to vary for people, but like where I'm at, especially like since Pathfinder 2e is new to me, I want the beginner stuff to rely on. Plus, it's so well drafted. Like, there's so many GM tips, and like it does a great job of reinforcing the rules for the GM. So, which is another reason, but not the main reason.
What about you, Art? Of those two, what do you feel?
Definitely the intro adventure, and what I appreciate. I've had long breaks when I wasn't role playing, but the first time I started playing a role playing game was 40 years ago. And I don't know if early on in my time playing role playing games, if they were starter boxes, but I remember having a lot of like boxes for my RPGs. Twilight 2000, its first edition, came in a box. Star Frontiers came in a box. I've got Middle Earth role playing from Iron Crown Enterprises right over here. And so what it often did is it wasn't necessarily like a quick start kind of box, but it definitely was like, it was the rule book, some dice, but there was always, because it was this box set, there was always like an intro adventure. And it wasn't just like a couple of pages in the back of the book. It was, they threw some maps in there. Maybe they gave you some little stands for counters. That's definitely, I think, how the Middle Earth role playing one went. Twilight 2000, the old box set, might have did something like that. And so I've been kind of happy to see these box sets coming back. I've got one here for Zweihander. I mean, like I said, I've got the original Middle Earth one, but there's another box that I was just looking at. Like I think Traveler sort of had one, the new Traveler versions, and I just ordered today Pendragon.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Now Pendragon's a system I don't know much about at all, and I don't know if I would just jump in and buy the rule books. But when I saw there was a starter set, I was like, oh, okay, because it's not just going to have some of the rules. I don't mind getting the rule book additionally, but I know it's going to have things to get you into it that, like, I ran a campaign with Columbia Games as Harn.
Yep.
You know, Harn Masters the system, Harn World is the setting, and that game is in some ways notorious for not having things to get you into it, because a lot of the player base, what the draw of it is this wealth of lore and background information that you can make entirely your own. But as somebody like myself who didn't have any entry point into the setting, I was lucky enough that I sort of found one and made one up. But, you know, I know some people out there in the Harn community are like, yeah, you know, I kind of wish there were a couple of like intro campaigns or intro scenarios, like a boxed campaign, just to, you know, what is Harn and what are we doing here and what is it supposed to, you know, be on some level, which I don't think that's necessarily something that's like clutch the pearls. Like it's whatever you want to make it. It's a wide open, you know, I think it's okay to steer players if they're looking for it to offer that up. So I'm a big fan of the intro adventure, and I love seeing, I don't know if it's like the resurgence, but I like seeing these box sets pop, like Lost Mines of Phandelver. Like I think D&D's got that one. It's got someone up in Icewind Dale or something like that. Don't they have a second intro box?
They have another one, but it's basically like a reformatted Minds of Phandelver. It's not very good. And then they have the Stranger Things starter one, which also supposedly was not very good. I don't know what else they've done past that. I do think what's interesting is, like we talked about, like, okay, you have this meaty system, right? And, you know, to bring this all full circle, you're going to play Lancer, right? Lancer is this own world that's amazing. Or Degenesis.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow,
right.
what a world, what a lore setting, but holy smokes, is it hard to digest? And so the nice thing about what we've been playing is, like, it is whatever world you want to do, and you have 20 pages to look at or less. You have a pamphlet to look at. You make the rules, you do what you want, and you just go with it. And that could be daunting, but like it is a fun exercise to just like throw yourself in there. You know, one of my favorite cyberpunk settings is Tokyo Ghost, which came up in Cyber Plus Punk, right?
Yeah.
And so right away I knew I wanted this kind of idea of, like, I have these powers, but I'm really at like someone else's whim. Like I either have to watch advertisements or pay, and like that's something I wanted to borrow from that. There's nothing like telling me to do that, and that's cool. And I don't have this daunting task of like, oh man, how do I learn the world of D&D or anything. I just, you know, you just pick it up and go because you make it your own. And that's like the big takeaway. It's not even that big a takeaway, but that's like the big statement of these low prep things is you do what you want and you don't have a giant hurdle to get past, which, you know, I've talked about with the Genesis in the past is, wow, what a mountain to climb just to get into it. It feels like.
Yeah. It's been good getting into it, but yeah, I can't imagine, like, you as the GM, what you've had to go through to try and internalize a lot of the things going on to make it feel like a cohesive setting.
Oh, I mean, you just have to, like, I had to zoom in. I mean, like, just trying to, I mean, not to get too far off base here, but like, for those who don't know, Genesis was basically a labor of love that was available for free. I think it still is available for free, with an amazing post-apocalyptic setting, or at least I found it amazing. And the art is the best art I've ever seen in any RPG. But how they presented the world is just presented in like different side stories, and there's 2 massive books. The rules are actually pretty straightforward, but it's all these different concepts, and not, you know, you may have this concept that works differently in England than it does in France. Anyways, yeah, that's just a brief aside. Worth checking out because it's free.
Yeah. And very, like what Matt was saying, one of the most evocative sets of books that I've encountered.
Absolutely.
Absolutely paints a picture. But if it's okay, so like I feel like in terms of, you know, our month was spent rules light, low prep. I feel like we've covered low prep. But is it okay if we spend a little time on the rules light half of, I don't know if it's going to be quite as interesting, but so one of the things there's a couple of things that sort of struck me. And again, like, you know, because this is my first time really delving into rules light low prep. And so the first thing is, you know, Cyberpunk and Long Dark Space Between the Stars, both Forged in the Dark sort of derivatives. Conspiracist is it's sort of its own thing, but it's basically like the Pyramid of Truth because it's the Illuminati. Pyramid is a D4.
Yep.
1 and 2
fail.
Is it 1 and 2 fail? Okay, so it's 1 and 2 fail, 3, 4 success.
Yes. Yep. That's it.
So it's literally, for all intents and purposes, we, you know, Patrick and I were talking about, it's a coin toss. Now the Forged in the Dark is D6, 1, 2, 3 fail, 4, 5 pass with complications, 6 pass outright. So it's not quite a coin toss, right? There's a little more nuance to it. And I guess you can build dice pools so that you can create even more nuance, or it becomes a little less clear what your odds are. But it made me wonder, like, how far down the rules light reductio ad absurdum would you be willing to go? Like, is a D, like, if you're willing to do like a Forge in the Dark, couple of D6s, and there's a little nuance to the die telling you pass or you pass with complications. I don't know. Do you feel like there's sort of a level where you're like, okay, nope, I need a little more game. Like a coin flip with the Pyramid of Truth actually is still good, but I'm not sure how much further I would go. Or would you even go as far as saying, do we need chance at all? Like, you know, we're here to have fun. We're going to make stupid stuff happen. You know, do we need the die to tell us? How many rules do you need for your role-playing game?
I think for me personally, I need more than the Pyramid of Truth. I think the die pool or the D6 1 through 3 is a fail, etc., etc. I think that's a much better. It just gives you enough variance. I think that's the lowest level of variance that I would want to go to, or the lowest level of chance that I would want to go to, because it's not the successes that tell the story, it's what you do with the failures and the complications on the die roll, right? And how you move forward with it. So more chances for more interesting things to happen with a bigger die pool, or, you know, more alternatives is just, I don't know. It was too black and white for me on Conspiracist with the coin flip, basically.
Yeah. What's the system where if you have the stat like you went, like you don't roll dice, there's no chance in it? It's been around for a long time. I think people like it. The name's not coming to me, but basically, like, if you're going to fight someone in a arm wrestling contest and you have arm wrestling and they don't, like, you're going to win. You're not going to roll a die. Sure, people love it. Doesn't sound appealing to me at all. The great thing about Cyber plus Punk is, one, the nuance in the dice you've already talked about, right? Like, I like that's a great thing you see in PBTA. You know, they borrow from each other with this. You pass, but at what consequence? With Cyber plus Punk, my character influenced that pass and fail and the chances of succeeding. With, I could build my dice pool by what enhancements my character had and how I assigned points at the beginning, and it, you know, that you start getting more and more rules. But even then with Cyber plus Punk, it was very low key setting those stats up, and that was like a good base rules light level. So even if you're doing rules light, I think you still, for my taste, you need the uncertainty, and that's why we have the randomness, is the uncertainty in the story. If you're just gonna, like, on a whim decide when you fail and lose, or leave it up to a 50-50 shot, I'm not as interested in that. But I think there's creative ways to have meaningful mechanics that still make things exciting and make things uncertain and still be rules light. I mean, it's
what I thought, I maybe I'm not correct in this, in thinking this. Of the 3 rules light systems we played, the one that struck me as the heaviest was Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And what I appreciated about it, it made it so that I didn't quite understand what I was doing at first, but once I started to sort of get the rules, what I appreciated was that there were a lot more things to, because everything in a low prep rules light game is you're sort of going on the fly. but I think I've already sort of explained, like, I need things to latch onto. And I felt like the Cyberpunk, having Matt pick a couple of characteristics which could influence die pools and give him some options of how he might approach a problem. I think there were 4 like body strength, whatever, general like approaches, which I think is how they're going to do some of the new Cowboy Bebop RPG. I feel like there's like, it's a similar kind of system. All of those things create prompts for me to then start riffing on. And even like on a heavier system, I think what it helped me appreciate was heavier systems, because what I found is by offering up, creativity is sort of born from constraints, or whatever the expression is, right? And so I find, like, if there's like a skill list system like Savage Worlds or Mithras or Call of Cthulhu's kind of, where you can sort of make up Call of Cthulhu, like you could probably swap out half the skills and it wouldn't matter to make it modern or whatever. But what those skill lists give you is something to look at and say, you know what? I'm going to make this an investigate role instead of a brute force role. And the reason why, and it starts, the juices flowing. And so once I started getting into the cyberpunk groove, I started to appreciate, like, oh yeah, like there's inventory, how much you're carrying matters, and you can, and you don't have to decide the inventory up front, but the more you decide to have, the harder things are going to get in different ways. And all these constraints started to materialize as we played. And I started to, okay, now that I see how this would interact with this, I could see how that might spark something over there.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you can do that, and I think that's a great point. I think we would all agree that, like, having a character have this or a character have this in their backstory, like, that's a lever for you to pull as a GM. What's cool in these low rules games, these rules light games, is how the people who design these games come up with rules light versions of those levers. So you have an inventory in Cyber plus Punk, but it's not a question of how much does the item weigh, or is it in your bag, is it on your horse, or anything like that. Like, those aren't concerns. It's really simple. Like, you check boxes and you can have so much stuff. But there's even like rules light ways of like becoming, I don't remember what the terms are, but like, you're an expert in this particular type of thing. And I wish I remembered the designer's name, and I'm sorry I've forgotten. There will be links down in the show notes and all that stuff. But they came up with a really cool way of accomplishing that. And it's cool to see these different approaches to complex things, having 100 different skills in Call of Cthulhu, but minimizing that and still giving you some of the same levers to pull as a GM and as a player.
Yeah, I do appreciate, I don't know if efficiency is the right word, but elegance maybe, in sort of when you're able to, there's an art to distillation, there's and I would think some of these Forged in the Dark games sort of, for me, I ended up really appreciating Cyberpunk because I could see how they've distilled things to cover a lot of scenarios that come up in a typical role-playing game session without too much cruft. But I could also see that there's a player out there where Conspiracist is the sweet spot.
Sure.
Because they're like, yeah, you know what? I just need to know one thing, yes or no. Yeah. And then I can riff. I'm a natural riffer, and I just need to know that one question answered, and we'll go. And so maybe it's just we're all unique snowflakes, and we need to and we need what we need. But I sort of, it made me, what was interesting about, it's about the friendships we make along the way. It's what was interesting about playing these rules light games for me for the first time and sort of doing it all at once with a few different systems is it really sort of held a mirror up for me personally to my role playing and what I value and what, I find useful and what helps and what doesn't. And I just thought that was a really interesting, unexpected result from playing some of these games that I hadn't really encountered before. I'd always sort of like, because I was like, I want the heavy systems and whatever. But so it didn't occur to me. And so when this opportunity came up, I was surprised by what it pointed out.
Yeah, and this is gonna vary from group to group and play styles and all that stuff. But one of the best things I think is just like the narrative experience. I've gotten out of low prep, low rules stuff for the most part. Just has wonderful narrative moments, and because you break down some of the walls of the nuts and bolts of a heavier system, you're not getting bogged down in combat. You have this more wiggle room, and I think to kind of fill in some of the like meat and potatoes, if those are missing, like you got to fill it in with veggies or something like that. I don't know, there's some kind of analogy out there that's going to work better than that, but like you're going to fill it in with narrative role play because you don't have so many. You're not going to fill your night with combat. You're going to fill it in with your players interacting, and there's not that many mechanical levers to pull, so you got to fill it with the narrative stuff. At least that's been my experience. Obviously that's going to vary.
Yeah. But at the same time, like sometimes I like everybody, I listen to other RPG podcasts. I watch others play, just sometimes it's entertaining. Sometimes I'm just kind of curious, how do they do it? And sometimes I often hear, and maybe this is more back to the story, but sometimes I'll hear discussions about how like, so I worked it out with the GM, how I wanted my character to die or become the hero. And so they sort of coordinate this. They coordinate it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what are you doing? Because I felt like, the whole, maybe it is more about the rules, like describing it as all these levers you can pull, if you, that's the exciting part, right? Like nobody knows what's going to happen. And I don't know how important it is to me personally that my player character get the hero's death or whatever to wrap up the story arc. Like sometimes it works organically, and those I think are the moments you might remember for a really long time. But I feel like if it's coordinated and orchestrated behind the scenes, you're not pulling levers anymore. And then, then I feel like you're sort of short circuiting the levers, and then, you don't need rules at all. And I don't know if I took to that personally.
Yeah, I think if you, I think the way you described it, if you're short circuiting how the game is supposed to be, like, I mean, if that's what you want to do with your group, fine, right? But like, not every character gets a hero's death. Like, there's going to be somebody that steps on the trap and gets crushed by the giant block coming down. Like, that's a great story to tell. I mean, it's a heroic death should be something that happens rare enough. And this is me going off on a tangent now. That happens rare enough that it still has meaning, right? If every character dies a heroic death, then it's just like, oh well, here, Patrick's going to go on for 45 minutes in his soliloquy here at the end to say farewell to his mom, but it's just everybody checks out and goes play Board Game Arena while I'm doing that, right? So I don't know. Some people need to get crushed by blocks, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've only had, just as a brief follow-up on that, I've only had like one character death or very near character death. I won't spoil it. But it's my favorite moment in all of RPG, and it was not planned. I did not tell them like beforehand, like, hey, your character's getting it tonight. It just like, it's how it played out. And I mean, it's in the Alien game. If you go track down Turgenev's Justice, the finale, whether they live or die, is just like my favorite. And I will go listen back to that and just listen to that person talk about their experience doing that. And it's such a highlight of RPGing for me.
Right.
Anyways, do we have final thoughts on, I don't know, like I've kind of expressed my like broad takeaways with this. I don't know. Do you guys have anything different or kind of final thoughts on Rules Light, low prep stuff? Or
I mean, it was a short month full of short games, so a short episode is what it deserves, right? So
sure,
we're at an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah. So one thing I will say, after the long dark space between the stars, That was my first. That was the first one we played in this series, and it was my first of these games that I ever tried. And at the end of it, I was like, I don't know why this isn't used to introduce more people to role-playing games. And then I started playing these more, and I'm like, if you introduce people to role-playing games with these systems, it would be an unmitigated disaster. Like, I went 180 degrees the other way because, like, I started to realize, like, you know, Patrick, just the amount of stuff you had to make up on the fly for Conspiracist.
Yeah.
Me, you know, because not understanding the 4 rules of Cyberpunk and then having to try and fill in all the gaps, you know, without a net. And so I started to appreciate that. And then if I then turned to a novice and said, okay, I've established this and now I need you to go, they'd be like, and so, yeah.
Some of that is just like in the rules writing, right? I mean, like that's a lot of these are going to be Kickstarter or itch products or something like that. They get spread by word of mouth or something like that. They don't have editors or anything like that. And so something like Score, I remember being really well written and not having questions about how things worked. Now, there is this uncertainty when playing these games, right? Like if it's rules light, like, well, what if I want to do this? There's not going to be an answer for it, and you have to be okay with that uncomfortableness. But there are certainly some that are better written than others, and some, because they want to fit in a pamphlet, are going to be more ambiguous. And so I do think you're right. Like Long Dark Space Between the Stars probably could have fit on a pamphlet, but like the rules were clear enough that I think it probably would work for beginners, at least someone who has an understanding of like what a role-playing game is and stuff like that. But I think some of that comes down to just rules writing.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I feel like, and I've seen this happen. You could hand the Lost Mine of what's it called? Lost Mine of Phandelver to a novice group of like teenagers, and I feel like, because again, I sort of seen this, like they could run it. Somebody could figure out there's enough, like there's the pre-gens right there. There's enough rules that when you say, so what do I do? You can look at the sheet and say, I hammer, you know, or I investigate, you know, like there's enough things that you can refer to that provide that sort of safety net. And so, and I don't know, having done these rules light ones, if I would still say that, even though initially I was like, oh yeah.
I think I agree with you, just because, especially because of the lack of the safety net, which is going to be like some games do more of like, what is even a role-playing game? Like that'll be in a rules light thing that may not be in another one. So like if you're a true novice, you're probably right. Without the safety net of a 100 or a 50-page pamphlet versus a 20-page zine, yeah, there's just probably too many holes for them to fall in. Maybe, I don't know, could be different.
Yeah I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah. So Art, I have a question for you. I'm throwing you a curveball. You were the only one who played in all 3. So what was the, let's borrow from another podcast that I listened to, Marry, Boink, or Kill, those 3 that you played.
Sounds like smart gentlemen there.
There's some good people in that one.
And I feel like the driving force behind that framework is the biggest goddamn genius of them all.
Oh, he's yeah.
I mean, I don't think we praised that enough. So
I need a T-shirt with his name on it.
I can get you one. I have them upstairs.
This says Art. That's like a pretty good, like T-shirt for us to sell, guys. Just a shirt that says Art.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And then on the back it says douche.
Good.
Yeah. So the question was Marry, Boink, Kill. That's, again, maybe the best framework of a question.
Really,
I think
all questions should be answered in this format, just across the board.
Yes. Child rearing, absolutely.
Honestly.
What I would say is Marry, Boink, Kill. So what I want to say up front is that whichever one I say to kill, don't take personally.
Sure.
So, obviously.
I hated with the passion of 1,000 suns in the most personal way. If I had to kill one, I think in this particular group, I would kill Conspiracist.
It's okay,
Now,
me too.
Right. And I think the reason why is the simplification of everything down to the pyramid of truth. I think with a little more meat on the bones, like I really liked the set. Like, I mean,
Sure.
if you have the Illuminati, you're in for a good time, right?
It's a good time, right?
You know, yeah. So I really appreciated sort of the Gonzo Illuminati take on it, you know, like, and that's why I was so curious about its prompts for you as a GM, because if it really gives you an entryway into these super Gonzo Illuminati conspiracies, I'm like, you know what? I can throw any dice roll on there, and that game has real value. But if it's just like, yeah, you know, it's like just answer a couple questions and Godspeed.
Yeah.
Then and so then the let's see, I got Boink and I got
Mary.
And Mary. I think in this case I would Boink the long dark space between the stars, because I think it's meant to be boinked.
Yeah.
You know, it's designed as a Tinder hookup. It's not designed as you know, a commitment. You know, I think because once you run it, you know, you've run it.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe that's not true, Matt. Like,
No, I agree 100%. I
Okay.
think you've run it, you've done it, and you've seen the most interesting thing about Long Dark Space Between the Stars is this sacrifice element, right?
Yes.
Like, what are you giving up to fix this problem?
Right.
I don't necessarily like the resolution of problems in either Cyberpunk or Long Dark Space Between the Stars. That's not a problem of the games. That's a problem of the like whole system. So it's like, okay, your problem is this crazy AI, and you have to win challenges against it in 6 different ways. And like, so how do you do that 6 times over? And like, sure, you come up with it, but then it's like, okay, now you have this other problem. How do you succeed against that challenge 4 other times? And then like to keep doing that, and like to have all of your adventures would come down to, here's a small problem, you have to get 4 successes. Here's a big problem, you got to get 6 successes. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's designed to like ask this question of like, what are you willing to give up to overcome problems, and see where that takes you. And I think that's a perfect Boink.
Yeah. And then of course that leaves I would marry Cyberpunk because 2 reasons. One, for me, I think it just edges out the idea of the setting compared to the other 2. Like, I love both of the other settings, like the idea of being like stranded in the middle of space. It's just that the game as designed sort of only has you either you're answering this question or this question, but it's sort of the same, you know, swap this in for that, you know. Cyberpunk, I feel like if you really wanted to, I don't know if it's what I would do, but I think you could have it be like a campaign system. I feel like, and they give you rules for it that, you know, maybe they're great, maybe they're not, but you know, just because the game intends in the basic rules to be your last run doesn't mean you can't make it a game that's Blades in the Dark, but Cyberpunk, you know, because Blades in the Dark is not a one-shot system as far as I know. It's meant to be.
No, because you have like relationships with other factions and things like that. Yeah,
Right. So maybe Cyberpunk it doesn't codify that kind of stuff, but it gives you a lot of prompts. And if the game is like, team, we got a run to do, you know, it becomes like Score, you know, where there's no reason why Score can't be, you know, the crew, right? You know, this crew has a history together.
Score is the same deal. It's very light rules progression things. It has a system in place that if you're going to be a team that, and actually that's the original premises is there was, gosh, I don't even remember what the name of the like organization that was recruiting people, but like, so people could drop in and out. And there may be one player showed up for all the sessions. They've had like 3 advancements and you're working towards the final job or whatever. But yeah, there's nothing to say that a rules light, low prep thing couldn't be an ongoing thing. And I just from what I've seen with Conspiracists and playing the other 2, like I think you're right. The one that lends itself more to a long-term marriage commitment has got to be Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And like before I ran Cyberpunk, I went on YouTube and I was looking at actual plays. And some of the ones I stumbled across, you know, they were on like session 6. You know, they just used it as like a loose framework to tell, you know, like the kind of story I told when we were running Savage Worlds, Libreville, 2300. They just use Cyberpunk to do it instead of a more heavier rule system like Savage Worlds. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no reason why we couldn't have, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just talked for too long. What about you guys?
I'm in agreement. I mean,
yeah, same,
Okay.
100% same arrangement.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Patrick, you didn't have a whole lot of. This was your first dip into it, Patrick. Are there anything else like in this that if someone's like, oh, I want to check some of these out, and the ones we haven't mentioned aren't catching? Is there anything you've played that like you've really enjoyed or read that you've really enjoyed?
As far as rules light stuff goes, the only one when I was looking at what to play with Art while you were out, the only other one that seemed really interesting was oh my god, you asked me the question, I had an answer. It was like Primeval Hunter or Art. Do you remember what we were talking about?
No, I remember you threw out Beast
Hunter.
Beast Hunter.
Beast Hunter, which is like a super interesting. It was for a one-on-one kind of thing. Like that looked interesting. Stone Age, go hunt the monster, kill the monster, use its blood to make blood magic kind of thing. I'm like, okay, cool. That's dark. I can get behind that. And then we already mentioned Into the Odd and Morkborg. I think that those both probably
Electronic Bastion Land is what Into the Odd's based off of. Now you would go see that, and it's like a book that's this thick, but like 85% of that is very detailed characters that you just like consult a table to, and like I'm going to be this very wacky thing. Electronic Bastion Land is a gorgeous book.
Nice. It's we should add it to the list of things to play. Just like I like that Into the Odd. The character creation, you just roll on a D66 chart or a 6x6 chart, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to be a sky pirate with a flintlock pistol. Okay, cool, check, done. Let's play. Like it's not anything crazy.
When we did Agents of the Odd, which is based off Into the
Odd,
which is like Hellboy Agent, and same thing. You consult a big table to the type of character or make your own.
Yep.
I will say that like one of the ones that I want to play most, and I'm still waiting on the like physical Kickstarter of the new edition, and it's probably the meatiest, is Mothership, which if you want the alien sci-fi vibe, the great thing about Mothership is, and now this is significantly meatier than something like Cyberpunk, but still it's probably 30 pages of rules, and the base system is still very light. There's lots of meat here though. The great thing about this is there's a million of these, and so you can pick up Mothership with rules light, and what I'm holding up for my mom listening at home is a bunch of scenarios that you can pick up for like $5. And so Mothership's a really cool one. Again, that's going to be a little bit meatier than anything like Score or the others we mentioned, Wandering Stars or anything like that.
Wandering Stars is another one that I want to play at some point.
So fun.
There's a couple of guys in AAC that have said, "Oh, let's play this." So it's on the list. So
yeah, that's fun.
Can I just ask one quick thing? So 2 of the 3 rules light games were sort of forged in the dark systems. Have either of you guys played Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy, or I don't know what other ones are big?
Nope.
No, I've read through Brinkwood. Brinkwood's something I want to run. That's the vampire one. And there's a more fleshed out. I think there's one. I could be one, but I think there's one that's based off Shadowrun. So you have the fantasy cyberpunk, and it's like fully. It's not like a rules light thing. But nope, I've just read some stuff. I've not played them.
Okay, I think I asked you that, Matt, when we started. And I'm sorry, Patrick. What were you saying?
I was just saying, same here. I have not.
Okay, I was just curious, like, if the ones we played gave you enough of a sort of entry point that you could jump into Blades in the Dark and be like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. But it seems like those rule books are so much thicker that there's got to be more to it than just understanding the die mechanic.
I really think there is. I think there's quite a bit more going on, like I said, with factions, and I mean, I think it's similar kind of concept. It's like you're doing a job, but it's this overarching story between the jobs. Is my understanding of at least Blades in the Dark. I haven't read Blades in the Dark, which I have.
Okay.
But I haven't read it.
All right. Yeah. Any closing thoughts? Anything anyone wanted to get off their chest before we wrapped it up?
I'll throw this out, just spaghetti on the wall. Does anybody have any? I know we're probably satiated for rules light, low prep games, but does anybody have any that they want to run coming out, or that they've got on their shelf that's just burning the next time we've got one of us down, or the next time we say, oh geez, I just can't take it?
I've got a million. I mean, I really do. That's why, like, I pulled them down while we were talking. If you're wondering, like, what I'm doing on my shelves, like, I've got a stack of just stuff here.
Yeah.
Slayers is one I've wanted to run a long
Mm-hmm.
time. There's what's the not the term for Japanese spirit, something Hunter Society, which is about hunting Japanese spirits.
Neat.
That looks gorgeous. Anyways, I have so many, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't like commit to one because it's always going to be like, oh, what am I in the particular
What are you
mood for?
feeling?
Dust is another one. Yeah.
How about you, Art?
Actually, if you can answer first, because there was definitely one that I saw and I'm trying to track it down and I want to find it.
So the one that I'm very excited and on the Kickstarter and everything for when it comes out, and you guys are so tired of hearing me say this, I cannot.
Oh, this looks awesome.
I cannot wait to pick up Eat the Reich. And
Oh yeah.
oh my god, it's, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's rules light, meant to be 1 to 2 sessions, and you play as vampire special forces that have been sent into occupied Paris, and you got to go kill Hitler. And it's just meant to be completely over the top. Renfield meets Dracula meets whatever other horror, meets Inglorious Bastards, and I'm so very much here for it. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
So I don't know if I was able to find the one I was looking at. I mentioned it to Matt when we were trying to figure out what we were going to run early on, and it's a game that takes place like in the moors of England, and we were talking about like maybe come back to it around Halloween, and I can't quite find it. One I actually is cliche and it's sort of better known, but Ironsworn and Starforged are two games that I think there's a lot more to them than just like a rules light, but they are like pretty rules light and pretty low, definitely low prep. Another one that jumped out at me that I think some people in the AAC group have you heard of a game called Ex Novo? So Ex Novo is sort of this, instead of like creating, let me explain it. So instead of creating characters, you sort of work together, collaboratively generate a story of a city. And I don't know much about it beyond that, but you sort of, as a group, come up with this city and then come up with a story for that city.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so I've heard sort of good things, but I literally don't know anything about it beyond that. And I'm kicking myself for not being able to find this other game.
I just tried to go back through messages. I can't find it either.
Yeah. And because I'm super disappointed that I can't remember it, because it really intrigued me, and I don't know why I didn't. I bookmarked 2 other pages about games to sort of come up with lists, and I don't think I bookmarked the one that's one I'm thinking. I'm going to hunt it down at some point. I don't know if it's something I'll be able to include in show notes, because I just don't know. But I definitely saw it on Drive Through RPG. The idea is definitely like you're sort of on your own investigating something in sort of the foggy night of England around like the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, I believe. And I cannot find the title. So I apologize, but I'll throw out Ironsworn, Starforged, Ex Novo, maybe, if I looked into it and it seemed interesting. But I know Ironsworn is a big thing, but having played Starforged, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that definitely leans itself more to the low prep, but not super rules light. But
right,
I mean, there's a good amount of stuff there for sure. Yeah, I'm kind of a sucker for like when Zine Quest goes live on Kickstarter or anything like that, like anything those, or if something comes with like a record, like I was picking up Ice Fleet here, like it's got a record that goes along with it, so you guys would have to come over for that one, I guess. We'll have to figure something out.
Yeah,
just to play Ice Fleet. I don't know. Yeah, lots of stuff. Do we know what's on the schedule for next week?
That is a good question.
Well, I mean, what? Looking at the calendar, I mean, you know,
Is that me first and am I first and third, or am I second and fourth?
I thought you
think
were
I'm second, fourth.
I thought you were second and fourth. So if we're sticking, are you not ready?
No,
we can pivot to something else.
No, we can make it. We can make it happen, Captain.
Okay.
We will. It's ready. It's in Roll20. I just need to finish making some character sheets. But
nice, because we picked our pre-gens, right?
Next from Black Lodge Trivia Night, we're gonna hear Call of Cthulhu Modern. Is that
that's Call of Cthulhu Modern confirmed? Yeah. Illuminati confirmed.
Nice. And then Matt, if we feel like we need to finish Cyberpunk, we can set something up, or we could just say right now that we had our time with it and it was great.
I want to know what's going on, because it's interesting to me. So if you haven't listened to the Cyberpunk deal, and I don't mean to keep us going, but I forgot that the premise was like your last job.
That's in the rules. It's supposed to be that, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if that's, so I'm curious, and don't spoil it, but I'm curious, is that what this, because like the scenario feels like I'm stuck in some kind of like training simulator or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. I want to know the story. So
cool. All right. Yeah. So yeah, I guess we did it, right? Chalk one up.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
Nice. All right. So in that case, then, yeah, like, you know, thanks everybody who either watched or listened. We really appreciate it. You know, again, we're on YouTube at Black Lodge Trivia Night, and I mean, podcast, you just search Black Lodge Trivia Night and wherever you get podcasts, right? And it sort of comes up.
Yeah, we'll show up wherever you're at. And if you like the show or not, spread the word. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, whatever. It all helps. Leave us a review. Any of that stuff is just good for getting the word out there, all that kind of stuff.
It also makes Art feel really good about himself. So just make him feel so good. So.
I am a total validation whore.
Me too, brother. Me too.
Yeah. All right. That's a very Freudian note to end on. So thank you guys. And obviously we're gonna talk very soon, but I had a lot of fun. So thank you guys.
Good time, guys. See you next.
All right. Take it easy.
Matt, you good? You need to go get in there.
Yeah, I kept myself shaving.
You did. I wasn't gonna say anything, but
I'm just like trying to make it as small as possible. But like my mic stand is like right here, so I'm like trying to dip and dodge around it to find out.
You should just let it bleed the entire time. Just have a single drip.
That's how you know we're serious.
Yeah.
Matt, are you okay? Yeah, just keep going.
I haven't done a line in like.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Honey,
fetch my keys.
Yeah.